Recently, Spotify released 2019 Wrapped, where all of its users can see basic data about their listening habits from the past year. People can see what artists, songs, and genres they listen to the most between the beginning of the year and the end of October. It doesn't cover the whole year. I don't really know why. I've only had Spotify for a little over a year, so this was the first time I actually got to see my Spotify Wrapped. It kind of surprised me. I mean, it wasn't what I expected. There are three main things that Spotify Wrapped tells you: your top 5 artists for the year, your top 10 songs for the year, and how many minutes you spent listening to music. My most listened to artist for 2019 was Foxygen. I probably could have predicted this. I consider Foxygen to be one of my favorite artists of all time, and I've spent a lot of time listening to Seeing Other People. My second artist was the Beatles. Again, this makes sense. The Beatles are one of my favorite artists. Um, Number 3 was The Voids. This was kind of a surprise. It wasn't a surprise like, oh, The Voids! No! I can't believe this awful thing! No, I could have predicted this! I definitely listened to The Voids a lot. They've had a big influence on me over the past year. And in retrospect, I think it's almost weird that they weren't number 2. But when I first saw them in my top artists, that was weird for me. And to explain why, I kind of need to explain how I got into the Voids. Stephen Ferris is my uncle. He was a founding member of a local Richmond band called the Black Girls. The Black Girls made 3 albums before disbanding and reforming as Ricky Shea, which currently has 1 EP out. I've listened to Stephen's music a lot, and I look up to him a lot. He's doing what I want to do, which is making music. Throughout middle school and high school, Stephen would occasionally buy me music for a birthday or Christmas or something. I never really used to look for new music myself, so for a really long time, my only way to discover music was for Stephen to buy it for me, which means that almost all of my formative albums were given to me by my uncle. And because of this, I tend to be influenced by Stephen's opinions a lot. In addition to basically handing down musical taste to me, Stephen gave me a lot of direction while I was trying to learn to write songs. Sometime when I was in middle school, I think it was in 8th grade, my younger brother Ferris got a laptop for the first time. Unlike my laptop, his was a Mac, which meant that it came with GarageBand. My brother and I are both musicians, so my dad was like, "Hey, my sons have a program that lets them make music. They should learn to use it." So my dad asked Steven to show us how to use GarageBand. He came over and helped us record a terrible cover of Don't Stop Believing. And when we were finished, Steven said to me, "Hey, if you ever record something, send it to me and let me hear it." That sentence was one of the most important things that has ever happened to me in my life. From that moment on, anytime I created anything, I had permission to send it to Steven. Steven was my hero. How many budding songwriters have the privilege of a direct pipeline to their musical hero? The answer is virtually no one. That doesn't happen to anybody ever. Ever since then, I've always placed some degree of importance in showing Uncle Steven my finished products. He usually has some kind of feedback, most often to cut out parts that aren't important. Sometimes I agree with his feedback, sometimes I don't, but regardless of whether or not I feel like he's right, if Steven tells me something about my music, I trust him. If he tells me something I don't like, it might be hard for me to trust him at first, but that never lasts forever. One of the albums Steven gave me when I was in middle school was the debut album by The Strokes, Is This It? If I had to guess which album I've listened to the most in my life, I'm guessing Is This It? The Strokes are one of my favorite bands, mostly just because of Is This It? Because I like the Strokes so much, I started listening to The Voids, which is the band that the lead singer of the Strokes started when the Strokes stopped being a thing. Here's my predicament. I think The Voids are good. Really good. I really like the Voids, but Steven doesn't. The Voids are weird. They have musical difficulties. Of their two albums, Virtue is easier to listen to than Tyranny, but both albums are very excessive, and it's pretty clear, at least in my opinion, and most of the critics I've read have said something similar, that Julian Casablancas does not care about making his music fun to listen to. He cares about doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants, for however long he wants. In my opinion, this attitude leads to some really cool things that Julian wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. But also, Tyranny and Virtue are not crafted the greatest. The Voids are a flawed band, but they have some of the best songs I've ever heard in my life. Or if not the absolute best, then on par with the absolute best. But for me, the Voids are kind of a guilty pleasure because Steven thinks they suck. And that's weird for me because I trust Steven with everything musically. When 2019 Wrapped told me that the Voids were my number 3 artist of the past year, I was surprised because I don't think of the Voids as one of my favorite artists. I definitely listen to them a lot, and I definitely like their music, but I wouldn't have called them one of my favorites. I just said I liked Vampire Weekend more, or Animal Collective, or I don't know, the
We live in a culture that says, if you enjoy it, it's good. It doesn't matter what other people think. It's good for you. This idea is incredibly convenient, but I can't think this way. I can't accept that someone has an opinion that differs from mine. If a critic says that Foxygen is a stupid band, I can't just shrug that off, because what if he's right? What if I listen to stupid music? Our culture says that we can both be right, but in my head, if he's right, then I'm wrong. So the only way I can keep enjoying Foxygen is if I prove the critic is wrong. In most instances, proving someone wrong is pretty easy. All you have to do is call them names and tell yourself, I'm better than them, and their opinion becomes unimportant. But I can't do that with Steven. If I'm gonna disagree with Steven, I need something stronger than,
you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about.
because Steven's not stupid, and he does know what he's talking about. But then, how can I prove him wrong? I can't. He doesn't like the Voids, and that's his valid opinion. If I'm going to enjoy the Voids, I need to accept that we can have different opinions. I think Spotify Wrapped helped me do that. Seeing that the Voids were my number 3 artist helped me realize that, objectively speaking, I like the Voids. Or else, why would I have listened to them more than Animal Collective between January and the end of October?